Jai Guru, everyone.
Hey Guru. Welcome everybody to the next minute of our podcast, Awake, the Life of Yogananda, minute by minute. And today we have reached minute number 49. After minute 48 was more about civil rights and Yogananda's challenges he had in the American South. Now we're back at Mount Washington. And it is that newspaper smear campaign has been going on and has caused some damage, and it eventually culminated into Dhirananda and Yogananda falling out and Dhirananda leaving. And this is basically what this minute is going to be about. In the beginning, we see some newspaper articles. They talk about how Yogananda was cleared, or the organization was cleared of the charges of being a love cult. And it says one of the headlines is "Inquiry in Cult Case Fruitless." So very dramatic, but it still has caused some damage. And also Dhirananda leaving. We will talk about this a little bit. Priyank, what's your comment on that?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. So you said falling out. Well, we don't know whether they fell out yet. It's more that at this stage he just decides to leave. So at this stage he's kind of not innocent, but we can't point the finger at him that much yet for just leaving. Obviously there's some backstory which we'll go back into in the next minute, where there's a whole legal case, but at this point in time it's just that he's withdrawing.
That's correct, actually, and we actually don't, like you said, we don't really know exactly what they were fighting about. Our different sources, they're inconclusive about this, but we do know is that at this point Dhirananda leaves, and let's talk about those newspaper articles a little bit. So there is basically talk of Mother Center being a Yogoda How to Live school, or becoming something like this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it was called, they referred to it as Washington Education Center. So I think that's what it was initially called. It wasn't called like Mother Center or SRF HQ or anything like that. And so we were just doing a bit of research on that, and like the main objective was that at the start was for it to be made possible for him to establish a Yogoda How to Live school on Mount Washington for training children along the lines of Yogoda, which is harmonious development for all human faculties, and Satsanga, which is fellowship with truth. So it's kind of like self-realization fellowship, but it really is aimed at children. And similarly, there was like elements of like physical and mental and spiritual results that you'd get from that. So interestingly, the courses they also offered there was psychology, philosophy, scientific spiritual realization, and of course the correspondence course. And there was also going to be like tennis courts and swimming pools and a museum and things like that. So one of the things that potentially could be a cause for Dhirananda to leave is that so he wanted to leave in 1928, I believe, but one of the reasons could be because he didn't like that direction, because they never actually, your Guruji focused more on distribution of lessons and classes for adults, really, although they did have Sunday school and it was popular, but the whole establishment wasn't geared for children, it was for everything. So one of the, and I'm guessing really, one of the reasons he could have decided to leave is because he wanted to focus more on education. And we know from later years that he actually started lecturing, so that could be one of the reasons.
Makes sense. Chris?
Yeah, I was going to comment on a similar vein, speculating really as to why he may have left. Whenever you look at the newspaper articles that come in. There's 2 or 3 there. The headline of one says Hindu love cult report erroneous. So they're saying that, hey, we got it wrong. The last time we talked about this, calling the Hindu SRF kind of organization a love cult, said no evidence found. But it goes into detail to say that the Los Angeles women that were reported to be participating in the rites similar to those used in ancient obscene forms of worship, was under the direction of Swami Dhirananda. And I just thought to myself, well, we will go into this in future minutes, but in this minute, that Yogananda really wasn't there for some time because he was going traveling and everything. So I just wonder whether Dhirananda was taking a lot of heat, in this time, from the press and from people in that area, and maybe he didn't, that falling out kind of stem from there. And you can speculate as to why and what happened, but that may have added pressure for him to think, well, I want to go in a different direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, if you see where both of them are coming from, right? In Ranchi, they had a school for children, and going back to what they did there, especially for Dhirananda, would only make sense. And this Yellow Press campaign against their organization probably made it even harder to have like a school for children, right? Because it would just add more fire to the whole thing. It would give them more material saying, oh, the love cult turns into a school now. And so maybe because of that, they wanted to move into a different direction. And maybe that's kind of what caused the fallout. Priyank?
Yeah, another speculative thing is we know that he later married that Gladys lady, and who became like Tara or something, and she would have probably been around at that time. So perhaps he wanted to stay true to his Swami oath, and he knew he couldn't have a relationship whilst being a Swami. So perhaps he wanted to cut that tie so he could formally start a regular relationship.
The draw of Maya.
Yeah, so their goals were definitely not aligned 100%. And eventually, Dhirananda was on Mount Washington for 3.5 years and served Guruji there. So that was also a long time. We see this, we hear Brother Chidananda talking about this, and then the narrator comes in, and it's a bit in a sad voice, right? So it's Guruji is really disappointed that Dhirananda is leaving, and he keeps referring to him as his friend. And there are different sources where he says how important he was to him. I think at one point he says, I have not done as much for anybody as for Dhirananda. I don't really know what that means. Did he maybe try to help him as much? And I saw there were, Priyank, you mentioned of the podcast that there were some speculations about who they were in their previous incarnations, and maybe some responsibility like that, which is interesting. But however, like you see those kind of pictures where Yogananda and Dhirananda are standing next to each other, and they always walk away from each other. So basically the movie is trying to show that there's like a split going on between the two with some sad music behind it. Yes, Chris?
I would love to know where they got all the footage from, because I did think this as well. I think they, credit to them, they did a great job at stitching this together, just as you say, Mike. They've got footage that's very appropriate for the setting, for the mood. You could almost maybe project what you think is going on in those images. Like, oh wow, they really captured the key moments where they're having difficulties because they're distance from each other, they're turning away, I think they did a good job there at capturing some really key moments. Whether or not it's 100% accurate. It looks spot on.
Why would you be really interested to know? For example, if I told you it was from Self-Realization Fellowship Archive 2, Folder 6, how's that going to help your life?
Well, I don't think it's going to help my life, but I think they've obviously done, credit to them, good work. Hey, I don't have any attachment in this life. I'm fine with or without it. Yeah? But,
I thought you were like a secret librarian archivist that had some like
okay.
keen interest in archiving.
No, that's
Suddenly revealed in minute
real life.
49 after knowing you for like 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Not a closet librarian, no. But I think, there's, I just wonder where maybe the SRF might have helped them with some of this footage, or where they got it from. I'm curious is where they did, but they had some good footage.
Yeah.
I think SRF definitely helped them. And to your point, Chris, if I had access to that archive, I would quite like that, to be honest. So, because I'm sure there's many more treasures in there that that would be interesting to see.
Someone contacted me on Facebook saying, because I recently uploaded some old videos that were on YouTube, just put them on our group page, and they're like, oh, where did you get this from? Like, I hate the fact that we have to like watch the Awake movie for these rare gems that belong to us all. Why can't I'm in a mission to like publish them all, so just where can you get them? And I was like, wow, he's got some proper zeal. I asked him how old he was. I was expecting him to say like 16 or 17, because like that's what I was like when I was that age, like when you're on this like mission. But he said 34, so but good on him. I think that's a good ambition, isn't it?
All power to him. Yeah, I mean, I like to see those, especially videos of Guruji that I haven't seen before. They always are super interesting to me because there isn't so much footage of him. So and then the footage of Dhirananda, of course, super interesting, and maybe there's material to make more movies afterwards.
That's what he said. I want to make a second Awake film, but I don't think SRF I don't think SRF is like really holding on to it for commercialization purposes. It's more to like, I think, retain like purity and like feeling, so there's not like oversaturation of stuff in the market. Like, so for example, when we have like a commemoration service or like online, and then they just released like this audio that you've never heard before, then you're like, oh wow, this is phenomenal, isn't it? And then you connect to it. But if it was, if everyone's just making clips of it willy-nilly just online, and it would just lose its power, kind of, wouldn't it?
Potentially, it does make it more impactful when you see a video and you hear it for the first time. You almost remember where you were and maybe your emotions or feelings at that time. To your question, Priyank, what benefit would you really get from this? Yeah, just to go back to this, you planted a seed, yeah. It kind of there is maybe isn't a word for this, but it takes away the romanticism of some of it. Whenever we look back in history, I think we look at it through a romantic lens a lot of the time. And this, whenever I look at this, it grounds it in experience that I can relate to say, hey, there were very difficult times, and Yogananda, you can see maybe in his body language, you can relate to probably some of the emotions that he was experiencing and feeling, and it kind of grounds the spiritual experience for me, which I think is a very important thing to do, because we live and breathe this every single day, and it probably feels a lot more challenging than looking back and hearing some of the teachings like, hey, if it was that easy, everybody would do it, but we're facing these problems every day and they're so distracting. So whenever I look at this, I think, hey, I wasn't there, or maybe I was there, I don't know, but I wasn't there with Yogananda.
You were Dhirananda, Chris. I can see exactly. The glint.
Then it brings it back to say, okay, well, this is possible. Yogananda, he said in a previous minute some of the biggest challenges that he's faced. Dhirananda would have been side by side with him and probably got wiped out by the experience, but Yogananda fought through, and you can kind of see this playing out in these videos. So that's why it's important to me.
Sadhguru, for example, he's obviously got thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours of his talks online. So this is the polar opposite of Guruji, because Guruji, we have probably few hours of footage in total of Guruji in video, and maybe at most 300 images of him, something small numbers. So do you think, for example, with Sadhguru's, do you think there's oversaturation? For example, I know that those funny videos where you have that gangster moment where there's they put the rap music, and then someone says something really cool and they put the rap music on, and then put sunglasses on him and things like that. So they've made loads of funny videos like that, and some of them are from really serious points and stuff. So do you think that kind of diminishes his what he's trying to achieve in any way?
Personally, no, because that's other people, editing some.
Not from his perspective, but from you. If you were his devotee, and this is the kind of stuff that you'd see, just
no. I mean, no, personally, but I can see why maybe other people might be, a little bit, disillusioned by it all. I think the Sadhguru is like a modern guru as such, isn't he? He's using technology for a certain purpose that I'm sure will be different to what Yogananda had in mind. Yeah. So yeah, he's harnessing it in many different ways, taking on a really wide range of topics, as you well know, Priyank, with the soil missions and things like that he's doing, and saving the rivers and things like that. So I think it's probably similar principle, but it's being wielded in a different way. So I don't think so. I think it's a net positive, personally.
I agree with Chris. And to your question, Priyank, I feel like it's more of a sign of the different times that we're both in, like Sadhguru and Yogananda, right? I feel like Yogananda made use of every technology available to him to spread his message. He would not say, "Oh, I don't want to go on tell it." Cameras were extremely new at the time, right? And there's still footage of him. And he recorded films. He went out there. He did shows and everything. He gave public talks. So I feel like if Yogananda was around now, he would be everywhere. It's definitely like you said. It's probably not a replacement just to watch Yogananda YouTube videos. It's not a replacement for actually reading his lessons and changing your life, right? And I can see SRF is this kind of organization that moves slowly, but they always think way ahead, right? So they try to make more strategic decisions that are long term, and then once they started going into the direction of putting content on YouTube, now they put loads of content on there all the time, right? And I'm pretty sure this will increase, and we will see more clips and more talks and everything. It is just there was such a long time when this wasn't the case. That's why we kind of always had this feeling. So this kind of almost like a Guruji video black market emerged, right? That is also there now, and then it's sometimes difficult to put everything into context. Chris?
I wouldn't really be quick to compare the two, but we uploaded a video on Instagram with Guruji saying, you people don't sleep correctly, and that's probably quite controversial in some senses. A brown Indian fella kind of from some of the people's perspective at the time, showing up and telling me how to think and what to do. We know best, we're in the greatest country in the world. I'm sure it was quite radical and in your face for the time, and we've talked about that in previous minutes about the racial issues and things like that Yogananda faced. So I think he probably made enough of an impact in the time, just as Mike says. He made use of everything that he had, and he was definitely in ways controversial in his own right, probably more so than Sadhguru in some ways.
Yeah, I can see even now America has this kind of way of allowing people to, there's like a scientific consensus, but there's always a lot of when it comes to nutrition, for example, there's a lot of popular people on TV that keep pushing different kinds of things on you, like the Dr. Oz's of the world, right? They kind of exist, and I feel like it exists more in America than like in Europe, for example. In Europe, people are more like, oh, what does my doctor say? What does my pharmacist say? And in America, they see Dr. Oz on TV and they go like, oh, he told me to buy this, so I started taking this now. And it seems like a lot more people are more experimental and they want to try things out for themselves. And I feel like Yogananda was definitely using that kind of mentality to actually put his wisdom out there and have some people who would just try it out and it would just work for them. That's probably why he went there. Priya?
Yeah. In terms of the content that they are Self-Realization Fellowship are releasing now, I think they're always focusing on that like mantra that they've got, which is keep the teachings pure, isn't it? So, for example, whenever a monk talks about a subject, such as, for example, overcoming selfishness or something, anything, they'll rarely talk about their own opinions on that subject. It'll always be Guruji's, like, he'll quote Guruji's stuff and how then to discuss how that applies to day-to-day life. They'll never come up with a new thing themselves and start preaching about it.
I agree. Chris, we're going to say something?
Just on the back of that, yeah, what I really thought was cool about the SRF when I first joined and why I loved it was that it was centralized, yes, around Guruji's teachings, but anybody can, get up and, lead the sermon talk. In the London Centre, you had the revolving cast of people who would lead the prayer, and that's great. I think that's an amazing thing, because it used to be back in the day, you didn't have the Bible, you had that read to you by a priest, and it was a big deal whenever that was transcribed into a different language. And we have that available to everybody now, and yes, we're singing off the same hymn sheet, but anybody can really get up there and lead congregations in that way. So it's pertinent to keep that pure for that to work. Otherwise you will fall into certain preaching ways that have been maybe in past religions in years gone by.
No, but the other problem is you can't speak about things that are outside your experience. And if you do, then you not only do you lose credibility, but you're putting the teachings into disrepute. So it's fair, for us to talk about our, this movie and stuff. We don't claim to be qualified in any way. We're just doing it because we want to reflect. But Jay Shetty, for example, talks about pretty deep stuff, right? Really deep stuff, and he goes into coaching and things like that. And sometimes if he quotes it, sometimes he's got a following which is absolutely huge. If he says something, people are listening to it. It's not any experience, but he's still saying it. If Sadhguru is saying it, or he'll say virtually a similar thing, you won't get nearly half as many views as Jay Shetty because he's so popular and he's so good with his media. So he's kind of like a pure path, such as Guruji or Sadhguru, saying it with the credibility and with the weight of their experience and the history and the the tradition that they're from. It should be the most powerful thing, but really, in today's world, we got all these modern day people that just come out and say whatever just to get the sound bites, and it sounds cool, but
it's probably been true forever in all of history, isn't it? In some way, like Krishna and Jesus, they didn't have, masses and masses of people. Jesus had 12 disciples. You probably know more about the details of Krishna talking to small groups of people in a village, or that kind of thing. The arc of truth is long, and everything else is quite different. So unfortunately, that's probably true, but good to know then you're on the right side.
Fantastic. So it took us till minute 49 for this disclaimer to say that we are in no way qualified to talk.
I'm pretty sure we might have said it at the time.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And let's continue, because Yogananda, we see the pictures of him where it's like Chris said, the footage is probably just footage where they were together giving a talk or a sermon or something. But with the music, and they would always show the part where suddenly one of them would look away from another, and we kind of see they're moving away, and then it, like it says in the movie, it culminates into them, Dhirananda leaving Mount Washington. And what does Dhirananda do, and what are the consequences of this? This is kind of what we can still talk about in this minute. So Dayamata said at some point that his departure actually caused a lot of devotees to go with him, and it required rebuilding of the organization. So a substantial amount of people went with Dhirananda, who founded a meditation center in downtown LA, which is not far from Mount Washington. And he thought he would create almost like a rival organization. Obviously, when Guruji heard that, it was disappointing to him, because that is a further escalation, basically, of them falling out. Priyank?
Yeah, escalation of hostilities. Well, actually, we laugh, but that's actually what it culminated to, isn't it? And we'll discuss that in the next minute. But because I always asked myself as well, how could anyone leave a guru, an enlightened guru such as Yogananda, and go off with Swami Dhirananda, who ended up leaving? So we know he wasn't in that space because he left the Swami order and then got married and had children, and so he wasn't in the same space as Guruji because he left the Swami order. So how can people think to leave such a realized master such as Guruji, or Prema Avatar? But many, I think, because Guruji was traveling so much, many would have barely have met him, right? So Dhirananda was there in LA heading it up for a few years, and they may not have even heard him, Guruji speak. They would have only seen and heard Dhirananda. And Dhirananda, in his mind, he was, obviously we know from later on that he thinks he's as exalted as Guruji was. So he probably didn't even refer to Swami Yogananda at that time as his guru. Just, we're both on par, we're bros. Yeah, we have the same master.
Yeah, I agree. So those are probably the main reasons, that on the one hand, a lot of the devotees who came in those 3.5 years while Dhirananda was in charge of Mount Washington, they would have met Yogananda probably, but he would come in and out. He would probably be there and then go on his next lecture tour. And Dhirananda was really the person who was running it. And so when he left, a lot of people had a stronger relationship to him than to Yogananda. Dhirananda did accept Guruji as his guru at some point, right? Early on, I think already in the Ranchi days. So it is definitely different. Like now when we go into an SRF temple or YSS temple, Guruji's picture is everywhere, right? Because he's the guru preceptor, right? That we come to pray to. But while he was still alive, it might have been different. There might not have been pictures of Guruji everywhere. I don't even know, like those prayers that we have on record, like that Guruji speaks, like he has the same line, he talks to the same line of gurus: Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Babaji, Larry Mahashai, Swami Yukteswar, and then he says Guru Preceptor, right? He doesn't say his own name. And I wonder if maybe the devotion towards Guruji was somewhat less than what it is now, ironically, when he was still in the flesh. What do you think about those thoughts, Priyank?
Yes, this thought came to my mind. Maybe while Swami Yogananda wasn't around, Swami Dhirananda would add his name to the lineage. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, because it was a very serious battle that ensued later on. But yeah, sorry, that's what I was laughing at. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, so what we know is, like, we were trying to research the name. So Dhirananda created his own meditation center in downtown LA. We don't know the name of it. We couldn't find it anywhere. If any of the listeners know it, please let us know. It didn't run for very long. So Dhirananda left in end of 28, beginning of 29, and it ran for 4 years until 1933. Apparently, it didn't go as successful as he hoped for. He also, when he left Mount Washington, he also let go of his Swami title, like Priyank mentioned, which might have also been a reason. And maybe also the whole spiritual dynamic wasn't there anymore, that the two of them had when they worked together, or when he worked for Guruji. And yeah, he later on became a professor in Michigan. We can talk about him more, because more things will happen between them in the next episode, when they will actually go to court and things will get ugly. But for now, I think this covers our minute pretty well. And so without any further ado, I'm gonna thank you all for joining, and Jai Guru.
Jai Guru, everyone. Jai Ma.